Are mortgage loans assumable? This is a question I get from time to time, especially when interest rates jumped up into the 6, 7, even 8% range. But before we answer that, what is an assumable loan? Well, it's pretty self explanatory. It sounds just like it is. It's when one person assumes the mortgage of another person. So a buyer would want to assume a loan if a seller was sitting on a mortgage with a really low interest rate. So if a seller's sitting at a rate of a 2, 3%, that would be really attractive for a buyer to be able to come in and assume that mortgage as opposed to applying for a new mortgage when rates are now 3 times that amount, right? 6, 7%. But here's the issue with assumable loans. They sound great in theory, but the reality is there's very few people that will actually be able to get an assumable loan. And why is that? Well, a lot of mortgage loans right now in the United States are under a conventional loan, and that's your Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And the problem with conventional loans is they have what's called a due on sale clause in the contract. So what that means is once the home is sold, the mortgage loan is due. So therefore, it is not assumable. However, your government loans, which are FHA and VA, are technically assumable. Now, it's a little tricky with VA unless you're assuming the loan from veteran to veteran, because if it's a non-veteran, there are certain things for the veteran that had the initial loan that doesn't relinquish them. They still have their benefits tied up. FHA, it's usually an easier assumable process, or it could just be from anyone to anyone. But here's the thing with any assumable loan. It is up to the existing servicer. So if you call a loan officer like myself or any loan officer that you've dealt with in the past, they're not going to be able to give you a definitive answer if the loan is assumable or not, because they don't have anything to do with that existing loan. Now it's in the hands of the servicer. So as a buyer, if you're looking at a property and the seller says the mortgage loan is assumable, well, you as the buyer or your agent or somebody would have to contact that servicer and get the requirements of the assumable loan. What are they going to require from you as the buyer? What documentation are you going to have to provide? So that's really important. And that process can take a while. We're talking months. And the reason being, some people always complain, why does it take so long? Well, you got to put yourself in the position of the loan servicer. They already have a loan that the seller has been paying on and it's performing. To do an assumable, there's no really benefit for the new servicer because all you're doing is just transferring it from one party to the next. And typically, they're not really allowed to charge a whole heck of a lot on this new loan. They've recently increased the fee that a servicer is allowed to charge. But in the grand scheme of things, it is really not that much. And a lot of times, too, they just don't have the manpower to do it. So that's why it can be a lengthy process. The experience is not that great. So that's the number one issue I'd say with an assumable. But here's the second thing, is that when you do an assumable loan, you have to accept the exact terms of that mortgage. And that means you have to accept it at that current balance. So let's say the seller has a $250,000 loan and you want to assume it. Great. But they're selling the property for $650,000. So in theory, you would have to make up that difference between the sales price, the $650,000, and their loan of $250,000. So that's $400,000 you would have to come to the table with. Now, some people will say, well, can I get a second mortgage or an equity line to bridge that gap? Technically, yes, you could. You could apply for that, but just know that once again, the first mortgage holder is going to have to give the okay. They're not only going to have to give the okay for the assumption, but also now with this second lien coming into the picture. There's also going to be requirements for the second lien. Some of them don't go higher than 80%. Some might go to 90%. So if you're looking to get in and get an assumable loan with putting less than 10 or 20% down, you're going to have a difficult time, because that equity line or second lien is not going to bridge the complete gap. Also, last thing I want to point out is that second mortgage or equity line is going to be at a higher rate, and they're usually an adjustable rate. So even though it might be attractive that you're going to go after that 2-3% first mortgage rate, just know that that second mortgage rate could be a 8, 9, sometimes even a 10% adjustable rate. So these are things you have to consider. Not saying assumable mortgages can't happen or that they're bad, but you need to know all the facts going into it. But once again, if you can qualify for it, you need to contact the existing servicer, which is going to be the seller's servicer of the loan, to see if you can qualify. Hope you found this interesting, but if you have any questions about assumable mortgage, feel free to reach out. Hope you have a great day.